Hey, today we're doing forms of government, and this will be a two-part series on this because we're going to have to understand what these things basically are, and then we're going to go into how they've functioned throughout history. All right? So this time you're going to be taking a lot of notes. Next time you're going to be sort of listening to it more and kind of going over like what are the results and thinking and evaluating and analyzing what these things are. All right. To start off with, there are two forms of government: free and not free. That's it. What you're going to find is it looks a lot like a bell curve, and so in the middle here we have a lot of countries that are kind of half free and half repressed, and then as we go out that declines, and so you have very few countries that are actually free, and you'll have very few countries that are totally repressed, and most countries end up somewhere in the middle. All right? The types of countries that have a free sort of system usually tend to be democracy, because democracy is the idea of one person, one vote. And so you have control over your life because you're casting a vote for this system. Like it says in the Constitution, we the people. And that means that we are in charge and we are responsible then for what goes on in our government. And this goes all the way back to Athens, where citizens would vote. Same thing in Rome, where citizens would vote on their Senate. So democracy is the idea that people have a say in how their governments are run. There is a kind of democracy called direct democracy. And that means you vote on every single law. So you have to be knowledgeable about all the laws and available to vote for every single one of those. You see this in maybe small organizations. A board of directors on a business, like a cooperative, you can see this in maybe a small government in a small town, especially in New England. They pride themselves on this, but it's very rare these days. What we really have is an indirect type of democracy, oftentimes called a republic. So we vote for people who then vote on the laws, and they decide how our governments run. We can vote them out, but oftentimes we can't change the laws directly. We have to first vote someone out. The new person comes in promising to change, and then hopefully they change. Maybe, maybe not. All right? So republics are voting for a person who then votes on the laws. We do have a form of direct democracy in the Western states because they have a system whereby you can put something on the ballot called the initiative process. So if you get like 250,000 signatures, then that will be placed on the ballot during an election, and the people of, say, Oregon or other Western states can vote on that directly. So it sort of bypasses your representatives and has a way around them. Most of the eastern states don't have this. Most of the western states in America do. All right. Another type of democratic system we need to talk about, and this comes up a lot and has a lot of confusion to it. It's called democratic socialism. Okay? So the most common form of this, it was to be found in the Nordic countries of Europe. So Iceland, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, places like that. Let's just take Sweden as our example. Sweden is a country that has democratic socialism. Now what that means is that they practice capitalism in their economy. Everyone can buy, sell, and trade. You're free to own private property and all that sort of thing. What happens then is the people have voted democratically. They have chosen to have very high taxes. So those countries are free. They're free to vote. They're free to own, buy, sell, and exchange goods and property. They have a capitalistic system. What they do is they just voted for very high taxes, and then they spend them on social programs. The problem is that because the word social is in there, people tend to equate it with socialism, as if somehow that you have a social program, therefore you jumped over to this side of the box. And so we're going to get into that a little bit more tomorrow when we do this. So don't confuse those two things. This is not socialism. These people are a democratic system that votes for social programs. Okay? All right. So that's the list of a lot of our free types of systems. If we go over here, we're going to find our not vote-free systems. These are known as authoritarian systems because there is a person or people in charge they have a lot of authority, and they use that over the top of other people. All right? And in the past, you're going to find that these were generally monarchies. Monarchies had a king or a queen, some kind of ruler like an emperor per se, and they were like the sole person in charge of all the lands. And you don't see this too much today. There was much more in medieval and ancient times. Today, I think there's only a few monarchies left that actually have power. So I think maybe Morocco, Saudi Arabia, those places where there's actually a king or a queen, and they have power to like enforce their will, take stuff, kill people, that kind of thing. There's a lot of countries in Europe that have hung on to their monarchy, but they're more just for like, socializing, representing the country. They go to parades, they wave, they smile. We talk about them in the tabloids, but they have no real power. They're just sort of paid to be there as figureheads. All right. The next one we see is fascism. Fascism is the idea that there is a single person or ruler in control, and everything in the country is funneled towards them, and they then bless or curse everything, and so that sets the policy. Do this, don't do that. But everything is funneled towards that leader, and it almost takes on a sort of like cult-like following. Like that leader is so important that everyone worships them. So you see pictures of that person in everyone's home, everything is focused on that leader, and from them flows all the power and authority for things in that country. So famous countries that had fascism would be like Italy with Mussolini, Germany with Hitler. Franco was the dictator in Spain, and so you can see fascism right there. Okay? Fascist countries around today, we really don't have too many of those. Depending on which side, whether it's communist or fascist, you could say Duterte in the Philippines, maybe. Maduro in Venezuela, maybe. You'd have to kind of stretch things to really figure out if they're actually a fascist or not. So we'll see if that rises again. I don't know. We've had some pretty bad experiences with it in the past. Communism, very much an authoritarian regime. They like to say that they have democracy, but it's a one-party system. So you get your ballot, and it says, vote for this communist leader, and you have one. Okay, so who do you vote for? Well, you check the box, and you vote for that person, because what they're really sending the ballot out for, if you refuse to vote for that person, then you're off to some sort of like death camp, gulag, re-education center where they beat you until you agree with them, kind of thing. So everyone votes for the one person, and they win in a landslide. It's pretty amazing. They get like 100% of the vote. So communism often ends up as just being one person in charge. They like to say it's a group, like a Politburo, a lot of them will call it, where it's a group of advisors that are vying for power, and the one that rises to power gets on the ballot, and then they become the supreme leader of that country. So, communism, does it work these days, or does it still exist? You'll find it in North Korea. So, Kim Jong-un, after he inherited from Kim Il-sung, I think, if I could get him right, and his father, Kim Jong-il. Can't quite get them all right. But you need to understand that in this system, that's how that works. Cuba will have communism still today. Venezuela is said to be communistic, although it's hard to tell the difference between that and fascism. So I'm not sure what Maduro is, the leader there. It used to be Chavez, then he died of cancer. His boy Maduro then, became the leader and calls all the shots. So hard to tell the difference once it's just a dictator in power. It's just an authoritarian regime, and I'm not sure what difference it makes calling it fascist or communist. It's really about the same thing. Okay, so you've got one person or one group of people, very small group, in charge of everything, and it dictates to all the people how they are to live. The last authoritarian regime is a theocracy. A theocracy is a country that is run based on religious beliefs or principles. The problem is you can't get everyone to buy into this, and so what usually happens is the people who instill these types of regimes are very authoritarian. So you want to think about the country of Iran today. It is run by the Ayatollah Khomeini, I think is his name, and he basically tells people what to do, and that's who runs the country. They have a president to sort of like make it look legitimate to Western countries. So his name is Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, if I can say his name at all. And he goes before the United Nations and speaks, but he gets his orders from the Ayatollah Khomeini and his group of clerics. So a bunch of religious people that get together and decide the fate of that country. There's only one other theocracy in the world, and that would be the Vatican, the Catholic Church, and it is run by a pope. So you have one person in charge of the Catholic Church, and today the Vatican, I believe, is the smallest country in the world, but it is also a theocracy. Because it's so small, it doesn't really register as being very authoritarian. So the Pope can say, I want this to happen to his followers, I wish this would happen, and countries may or may not follow it, but really has almost no political power compared to like the Middle Ages, where the Pope could excommunicate kings from the church and kick them out and have them, dethroned basically, and start wars because of his power and what he said. So those are examples of theocracies. All right? The last thing we need to cover are economic systems. There are two. One free and not free again. All right? Capitalism is when people buy, sell, and trade things as individuals, and they do so freely. Okay? So a person will have control over their own stuff that they earn. So if you get some money by working, you've traded part of your life away, now you have some money, you buy some stuff, that stuff is yours, like a house. It's your house, and you can buy, sell, or trade a house. So that's an example of capitalism. And it's considered very free because it's the individual that's actually making those choices. They have power over their own life and individual choices there. Socialism is an economic system whereby the group decides how things will be bought, sold, and traded. And when I say the group, that's a nice way of saying it's the government, okay? The government decides how things will be bought, sold, and traded. So almost always you're going to find that socialism lines up with these. For example, in the country that was communist, most famous one was the Soviet Union, United Soviet Socialist Republic, the USSR. That's what that stood for, okay? So politically, they were communistic, and economically, they were socialistic. The government decided how to do things as far as buying, selling, and trading. So if someone says, I'm advocating socialism, we got a real problem in America because oftentimes those people are thinking in terms of this. But if you ask the people of Sweden, are you socialists? The Swedes would say, no, we're capitalists who tax ourselves heavily to do social programs. We are not socialists. Okay? So I think a message needs to go out to say like Bernie Sanders, who said, I'm a socialist, and everyone went, whoa. Are you kind of confused? You talking about like Sweden? He goes, no, I'm a socialist. And people were like, so you mean like Venezuela, where people are like attacking each other in the streets and it's like Mad Max for basic resources. And Bernie just kept saying, I'm a socialist, and Americans got sort of confused. The people who wanted Bernie and supported him really were hoping that he meant this. And the people who didn't like him thought he meant this. And he never really clarified that, so that really hurt him in his campaigns. But if you Google it, you'll find the definition for socialism right there. I think that's what we should go with. Let's go with the Google definition. Socialism is where the government controls the buying, selling, and trading of goods and services. In fact, so much that the Soviet Union did not have money. You just got little, credits that said you are entitled to this much milk, you get this much wheat. And you would go stand in line and you would collect it. There was no buying, selling, and trading. All right? So those are the main differences. These are economic systems, and these are political systems. You need to keep those separate. Now here's where it gets crazy. There are two countries that are really strange. So if you look at China today, they used to be communistic and socialistic. And after 60 million people starved to death, they said, you know what? We're going to change something. So in 1978, China, they went capitalistic and communist. So that was called the Great Reopening. Deng Xiaoping was his name, and after spending some time in prison because he said, hey, this is the way we need to go, things were falling apart, and they took him back out of prison and said, okay, you think you got the answers? Let's try it. So he said, we're going to keep our communistic function, but we're going to open up our economy and make it capitalistic. So in China, you have a political system that is communist, but a capitalistic economic system. And almost nowhere in the world does that happen. So that's quite unique. The other very unique one is India. India has, they have socialism for their economic system, and they got there by voting for it with democracy. So India has socialism for their economic system, but they are free to vote for it, and they do. They've voted for a very controlled by the government economic system. So India and China are the two oddities in the world. Normally you have capitalism, democracy go together. Socialism and, these authoritarian regimes go together. And over here you've got this weird one where China, capitalist, authoritarian, and then you've got India, who is democracy, but they voted for socialism. All right, so we're going to analyze those results in the next one.